Hello and welcome to this midweek session on what's been happening in the US uh, with Charlie Kirk. For those of you who are not familiar with him, he is a conservative, was rather, conservative activist from the conservative side of the political spectrum in the United States. Very young, only 31 years old. At the age of 18, started this association called Turning Point USA, which basically their purpose was to ensure voter mobility amongst the youth and get them more engaged in politics. I remember when I lived in the US, there was this whole campaign carried out by MTV, which was called Rock the Vote or something. And they had an MTV bus that traveled all over the country, trying to get people to vote and things of that sort. So, voter mobilization of young people has, of course, always been a challenge. But what Charlie Kirk did very effectively was to engage people with young people in debates and question their views, challenge them, provide them with answers. And he always did that in a very accessible and a friendly way. No matter how vicious someone got with him, he always responded with a certain amount of I guess one can say grace. That would be the right word. Of course, there are views of his which people didn't quite agree with, and that is but natural. But his ability to stand up for those views, to engage with people who were very anti those kind of views, was something truly unique and special. And not to mention the fact, young man, only 31, dad to two kids under 5 years old. It's just been very tragic. He was at the University of Utah doing an event called Prove Me Wrong. It was part of his comeback show, which he was going to take all over campuses in the United States. And this was actually the first stop. And it was here where he was shot dead on the second question that was asked of him. So I think some people will wonder why I'm having this debate. It's happened in the US. Why does it matter? I think because personally in my own life, I've worked in a place like Kannur in Kerala, where I saw a lot of leftist violence. We, of course, don't know who's behind this particular killing, but no doubt political rhetoric has been very, very vicious. So that's my brief introduction, and I'm going to hand over to Saurabh. And of course, you know him. He joins us very often. Saurabh, thank you for joining us early in the morning from Pennsylvania.
Thanks, Advaita, for having us. And that was a very good description of Charlie Kirk,
Mhm.
who, as you noted, was uh, had three or four very good qualities that are very rare these days. The first was that he articulated his point very well, but in doing so, he always listened to the other person. So it was a debate, but also a two-sided debate where you listened and not just tried to speak over somebody else. He had strong opinions for sure, but he wasn't mean to the other person.
Yeah.
And even though he was trying to change their mind, he did so with dignity. So I was very impressed by the way he handled these debates. I watched him do an Oxford Union debate, and then there were some rapid fire ones. And I thought, this is the sort of thing you need everywhere. You need that in India as well, where there's a tendency to speak over one another. I'm sorry to say. um, Maybe that comes from the growing up. I was always told to shut up, so that tendency probably persists. But yeah, I think you need that. You need to be able to um, hear the other person. And I'd go a step further. I think it was Christopher Hitchens who said that unless you can actually articulate your opponent's view better than they can, you have no business debating them. And so
Mm.
he was very close to that kind of ideal, and um, he was very important for the young conservative movement. Firstly, because he was young and conservative, and he kind of defied some stereotypes of
Mm.
conservatism that kind of go around. One being that they're not very articulate, which he defied
Mm.
very gallantly, and he was very energetic. And he, whether or not he changed minds en masse, this is the sort of person you need. You need this from across the political spectrum, not just on the right. But this is the sort of calm person that you need. That really, what people like Kirk did was they made political discourse more appealing. Like you could imagine disagreeing with a guy like him and going for a drink with him later on.
Mm.
That is something that is being lost everywhere, partly due to
That's
polarization and partly because we just don't listen to each other.
yeah, yeah. And this whole sort of, it was appalling, really, because one saw videos on TikTok of young Americans, some of them celebrating this. And we saw a similar thing happen with Luigi Mangione, a young man who killed the insurance CEO in New York a couple of months ago. And he was some sort of poster child for the radical left. This sort of idea that social justice can be defined as taking revenge, violent revenge on symbols or people who represent certain ideas that you don't agree with is to be celebrated, and worse, to be copied.
Yeah, I mean, there are many layers to this. The first is that you've got a bunch of people who express their views on TikTok not because they're marching for a Bolshevik revolution. I mean, they still love their chai lattes and little iPads, and they live in an economic bubble. But it's something they do because they have social media. They can express themselves, and there is, I'm sure there are terms for this. There is a social contagion that allows them to do that, or social culture that allows them to do that. I mean, historically, I think you're getting to this is that historically, um, the left has been slightly more intolerant than the right, even though they fight for justice. And in their view, the whole injustice thing can be, becomes a greater good kind of argument. Yep, we're fighting for this. We'll break, but you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. But I don't think that's the dominant phenomenon that you're seeing over here. The dominant phenomenon you're seeing over here is just a factor of slight degeneracy. I don't want to sound like an old fogey here. Slight degeneracy, um, amplified by social media by people that have really no inclination. So I wouldn't think of these people as suddenly they're going to rise and march against storm the Bastille like the French Revolution. They're very content and happy, and perhaps that's the problem, that they're content and they've become and they fight wars on their iPhones and in their minds. Um, so the thing I would take from this, as opposed to the thing I would take from the celebration, the violence, and the comments that came, perhaps more than from the random TikToker or influencer, is what you see in the media, like the MSNBC and CNN.
Yes.
And in the media, what that tells you is that the media doesn't say anything unless they feel that there is a population to serve. Like
Mm.
MSNBC came up with the most asinine statement after the
Yes.
assassination, something to do with he essentially saying he deserved it.
Yes, that
Really,
if
yeah,
you generate hate, then hate
yeah,
eventually gets you, something of
yeah,
that sort, which we see happening in India as well very often from this section
yeah. But the
of
thing is
people.
that when MSNBC comes up with a statement like that, it means that there is a strong viewership that enjoys that statement. So what you're
Mm.
seeing here is a heavy amount of polarization in the United States. It's always been the case, but it's getting more and more ossified, and it is unfortunately both sides. It's not as if it's just confined to one side. It is both sides. I
Mm.
would say it's slightly more on the left,
Mm.
but only slightly more. It's not like it's completely devoid on the right. So we're not talking about good versus evil over here. We're just talking about various. We're essentially talking about polarization, and
Mm.
with each side believing that they have virtue, morality. That's the word. The worst thing is both sides believe they have virtue and morality. Well, one side believes they have God on their side, and the other one believes that they have science and morality on their side, which is also treated like God. So it's so that's what you're seeing an expression of over here. And when you look into their arguments, there are multiple layers of it. There are multiple layers of whataboutism that expresses itself. But fundamentally, this is polarization, very, very severe polarization.
And then you throw guns into the mix, and there you go. I remember the last time we spoke, or one of the times we spoke, was you live in Pennsylvania, like I've already said, and President Trump was actually nearly assassinated in Pennsylvania, and that was again very random and a very nondescript sort of individual who was behind that attack. Even in this particular case, Saurabh, there is very little evidence of who this could have been, and there's all kinds of speculation.
Yeah, and but what you can actually say who it's not. We don't know who it is, but I think there's if Poirot was to investigate this, he would probably exclude a few usual suspects. the most um, the most convenient suspect, the one that I know I feel the right wants to believe, is your typical kind of stereotypical left winger, dyes their hair, has their pronouns, um,
Nose
wants
rings.
nose rings, wants to free Gaza, and
Mm,
uh, and basically um, went on a you'll hear them screaming when Trump came to power or crying.
mm,
I mean, I don't. I mean, as much of that caricature is, I, I don't think that that's the sort of person that fired.
mm.
With whoever fired was very capable of firing,
Yes.
which doesn't really narrow things down politically. Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say it doesn't help with conspiracy theories because one side will say, well, it means that the person who did was professional, but the term professional means that they were some sort of hitman. But there are
Mm,
plenty in the United States that are very good at firing that aren't professionals.
mhm.
So that the fact that it could just be a lone wolf is very much possible. And if you look at the history of assassinations in the United States, assassination attempts and assassinations, um, most haven't been some sort of uh, organization that has done it. Most, I mean, there have been a few, but most haven't been organized. There have been lone wolves that have in their minds uh, elevated themselves to a very high position. They've thought of themselves as being vanguards or something, or you would never know what's been going on inside the mind. The guy who shot Ronald Reagan,
Mhm.
uh, I think he was reading Catcher in the Rye, if I'm not mistaken. So, what was that all about? What was going through his mind? Was he
Mm.
what kind of politicization was he facing that caused him to do this? So, um, the the obvious suspect would be that since Charlie Kirk rallied against the left and against many other things, he was very pro-Israel. He had no qualms of being called Islamophobic, and he was very much against DEI. That you would think that the shot was fired with people who believe strongly in those elements, and I don't know. I mean, things don't neatly always fall in place because these things don't make sense because they're not supposed to make sense. So,
You know,
uh,
Saurabh, just to come back to your question, I'm going to pick on this a little bit. Is you said there are people who are very skilled to shoot at that distance and with that accuracy in the United States, because of course you have gun ranges, you have gun ownership, and people do take it up even as a hobby or for hunting and do develop a certain level of skill. So then to assume automatically, because this was such a precise hit, that it was a professional hit is maybe going out a little bit on the limb. But in all the previous assassinations that have taken place, be it Malcolm X or JFK or Bobby Kennedy, or even Reagan for that matter, you had a certain level of proximity, and the assassins were caught there and then by the people around. In this case, it was at a distance. Secondly, there was an escape route which was activated and which he successfully executed. He got out of that location. And to me, that is very intriguing that, there should have been a car, or was there someone waiting to take him away or her away? We don't know. But, it wasn't just the shot, it was the fact that he got away after doing that, and got away after possibly carrying an ammunition or a gun that would have been long barreled and would have been sort of distinctive and easier to spot than, say, a revolver or something like that. So all these things coming together makes it seem like it could be some sort of a professional hit.
Yeah, no, you do bring a good point about the escape. So it does sound like the escape, at least, sounds fairly well rehearsed and planned. Although we don't know that this person has actually escaped, meaning the person has escaped for now, but what clues have been left behind and how obvious those clues are, we don't know. I mean, there is a tendency at the moment, uh, and I want to see going on Twitter or X will drive you crazy if you're looking for the truth. There,
Mm,
there is a tendency at the moment that everything is so real time that you
mm.
get these theories and counter theories, and
No,
there's
there's one.
somebody.
Do you know about the one where there is an airport, a domestic airport very close to the university called Provo Airport? And it seems that there was a flight that took off from there at about, I think, 5:10 in the evening or something of that sort, and switched off its radar a few minutes after takeoff, which is illegal, and then was undetectable. So now Candace Owens, for example, has picked up on that and is talking about, a lot of people are actually coming down on the side of, what is this? Could this be something more than what it looks like?
Yeah,
And if you look at the fault lines in the US, especially during the Trump presidency, not to get too conspiracy theorist on this, but to attack and kill someone like a Charlie Kirk, who had a lot of resonance with young America, kids in high school and college, really did resonate with him, either positively or negatively, but they did resonate with him. To have someone like that done away with in such a way could lead to more violence and social unrest.
no, absolutely. And the thing is that sometimes when something happens in a certain direction, there is a tendency to believe that those who gain from that direction were the ones responsible. But we don't really know how this is going to all play out. My uh, my guess is that this is not going to help the left, and
No,
going in the next kind of pit stop we have is the
midterms.
midterms,
Mhm.
and I think that uh, for several reasons, I think my prediction at the moment, barring something else that comes, barring another black swan, is that the Republicans are going to win big time in the midterms, and the right is winning the culture war. The left is losing it.
Oh, big time.
So yeah, so two things would come from that. One is that why would the left do this if they would know that it's going to harm them? But then again, there's there's no relationship between the outcome and the process. It's not like, oh, the outcome went one way, so that must mean that was what the reason was. I mean, today is 9/11, right? And
Yeah.
the number of conspiracies that have arisen about 9/11, and there's nothing you can do to break those conspiracies. You can't convince somebody who's a conspiracist. Um, I mean, the whole thing was detonated from. I mean, the whole thing was detonated, and people knew about it. And there's no way you can break those conspiracy theories. So we're going to be going through some very, very information muddy times. Now, you mentioned that plane that took off. I mean,
Mhm.
the American intelligence service is not a slouch. They would know which airline they're talking about. I mean, it's not it's not some sort of X Files or that TV series where that plane just disappeared and reappeared after 8 years. So they should know what that plane was, and so um, if these are the smoking guns, then they should be able to figure it out.
Mm.
Um, and so I think whatever the truth is, uh, it's it's going to be very difficult discovering it in real time. Like, the
Do
biggest
you
casualty
suspect?
is
Do you suspect that this could end up being a cold case? Because in, like I said, in situations like this, shooters are usually, because this is a crowded place. It's not isolated. If someone's walking around even with that gun in his concealed in a carrier or whatever, it still is noticeable.
yeah.
There's many
My
eyes up there.
if I was to make a guess, I'd say that they'd find out.
Mm-hmm.
They'd find out who it is, um, because of precisely the reasons that you've given. The the fact that it would be very difficult to just walk away. So they should be able to find out.
Mm-hmm.
And we obviously live in very different times from uh, you know um, 30, 40 years ago when you could pull something like this off and nobody knows. But now, with all the surveillance cameras and just the ability to trace things and track things, um, I think strong chance that they should find out. But the thing is, what happens in this sort of situation? So America is going through a very turbulent time. Um, it's always had a level of turbulence behind calm waters, but now the difference is that the water is not calm, and what's going beyond underneath it is even more turbulent. So the right is the right wing um, is viewing this as political violence by the left, and they're also looking at the reactions of the left and saying, see what I told you, these are evil people. Um, and the left is, of course, giving them plenty of ammunition to come to that
Mm-hmm.
conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that this is going to have an effect in the psyche of the right, and not necessarily a good one. Similarly, with the case with that Ukrainian woman that got stabbed on the train.
Yes, yes.
So the way to deal with that isn't going to be the way to prevent an attack like that from happening again is to go to the root cause of, or not the proximate cause, which is you can't really ever deal with the root cause. But the proximate cause being that uh, many of the judges are giving very lenient sentences. So
Mm,
that is what you need to sort out. You also need
mm,
to sort out the fact that there are a lot of mentally ill people and there aren't enough mentally ill institutions
mm,
or physicians. But it does. The response is going to be that nuanced. It never is. Instead, what you're going to see is an outpouring of racism, and because again, it's never it's when you have such emotions at scale, you don't sit down coldly and say, okay, why did this actually happen? So similarly with the Kirk assassination, what you really want is you want to double down on what Charlie Kirk did. Like you want to proliferate that. You want to proliferate the
oh,
uh, the,
yes.
the engagements, because that's the only way you're going to a honor his legacy and b counter the
Mm,
forces that maybe not led to his death, but certainly led to the celebration. But again, I don't know. I think that there's a temptation in these sort of situations, just for the emotions to rise and say this is a pivotal moment, the Rubicon has been crossed, blah blah. I've heard all of these terms. I mean, as they
There's
say,
also, Saurabh, there's also a tendency to keep score, right, in these kind of things. When you have two opposing sides who carry out violence or have carried out violence against each other, there is
yeah,
a scorekeeping that you got him. And I was speaking to a very close friend of mine, and he's not a MAGA supporter at all. I mean, he's white American male, liberal, but this, I mean, he's more of a centrist or a libertarian actually. Uh, this really has bothered him. He says, I didn't expect for it to for it to impact me this much, because he hasn't really been a Charlie Kirk fan. But I think part of it is also the cruelty of it, and that he was a young man, a husband, a dad to two little kids. I think that's really touched a nerve.
yeah,
And the fact also that, like, as we mentioned earlier, that he was likable, even though if you didn't like his views, he wasn't offensive in the way he put them across. So this, you're right, this is going to actually, I think, influence a lot many more people who are not necessarily MAGA people, but are starting to going to look at this and say that, are we missing something?
yeah. I don't think this is going to help the left at all. This is going to hurt the left. And in the United States, and I'm sure in India too, when you look at political fortunes, the 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 change in political fortunes happens with small shifts in voter preferences. Not the, it's never like, oh, okay, Republicans allow 80% of the votes. It's only like 3 to 4% shifts. And where are these 3 to 4% shifts going to come from? They're not going to come from your MSNBC viewer. They're not going to come from the person that has celebrated his death. They're going to come from exactly the sort of person you describe, your friend, who hitherto was not a Republican, and but wasn't an MSNBC, isn't an MSNBC kind of a diehard uh, supporter of um, of of the far left, and so that's the sort of person that they can change.
Oh, they
And
already changed them with
yeah,
something
yeah,
like this. It's so relatable, a young guy, family man, uh, pleasant for whatever it's worth, in a very toxic environment where people say and do the worst things. It touches one, even if like he said a lot of things about India in the past week, and this recent upheaval that we're having with President Trump, although things are much better now. uh,
yeah,
but he spoke as an American nationalist. I mean, I've said a couple of things about America in the last 10 days after these tariffs. Does that make me anti America? No. But it makes me
yeah,
pro my country and my country's interests. And I think someone like Charlie Kirk was exactly that. He was for American interest, and that's fine. And maturity is to understand that nuance.
yeah, yeah. And I think what actually now thinking about the dynamics, what I think is going to push a lot of people away, or some people away from the left, is the fact that uh, is both the optics of what happened and who it happened to and the way it happened, um, uh, in the sense that it was in the celebration of free speech that it all happened, and the second is the celebration, um, uh, and that kind of happiness that people are exhibiting towards his death will really push quite a few people away from the left. So I think that in some ways this is I wouldn't say it's an inflection point, but it's certainly a variable, big variable in how American political fortunes are going to play out in the next 4 years. And the other variable, which you're going to see very soon, is when Mamdani wins New York, which he will.
Oh,
Um,
really?
oh yeah, he will win New York. When he becomes a mayor and he and if he goes ahead with his plans to to reduce police presence, which I hope he won't. I hope he's smart enough to realize the difference between rhetoric and action. Then you'll see much more of a shift to the right, because you'll have a live case of a great American city uh, being destroyed from within. So uh, it's not looking good for the left, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Uh,
So
and
what you're saying, let me just break that down. What you're saying is that it's very likely that Mamdani will win, and
mhm.
then subsequently, once he's in charge, he's going to make some moves like reducing police presence on the streets of New York, which will then push the city into more chaos, violence, crime, and then people are going to then shift even more right.
If he
That's what
does
you're saying.
what if he does what he says he does, and I'm hoping he's smart enough not to do what he says he believes in, the reduction of the police, the buying out of homes for communes, etc., etc. I mean, whatever his stance against, he doesn't like Hindus apparently. Uh, that's okay. I mean, as long as he does, as long as uh, he also doesn't like Israel, but that's not going to affect New York's economy. What's going to affect New York's economy is if the crime goes up and if businesses start moving away from there. That's what's going to affect the economy, and that's what his economic and social policies
I mean,
will
he's
lead
a
to.
socialist, so
Yeah.
there, that's part of the territory. But I would say, Saurabh, with something like this, people like Mandani on the left now need to be very careful about their security as well, because this sort of retaliatory action is not going to be unprecedented, as scary as that sounds. But the emotions are so high right now. And also, someone like Charlie Kirk was being viewed increasingly as someone who had a possible future in the Republican Party, as a possible leader going into the future. He wasn't part of the administration right now, but if you just look at his trajectory from the age of 18 to 31, I mean, amazing strides. And this was someone that people thought had a future. So I think people need to be very careful on either side of the aisle now, especially those with some sort of a future. Am I being paranoid, or do you think?
No, no. The We're kind of seeing in the United States things that happened infrequently happening more frequently. So it wasn't as if there was no political violence in the past. I imagine people living in the 60s uh, seeing, the slew of assassinations that was happening probably thought at the time that United States is collapsing with Vietnam and with everything else. The big difference now is that we have social media, so that collapses or the fear of collapse is going in real time. But yes, um, the there is of course the risk of tit for tat, and there is also just that general feeling, just that general level of discontent is much higher than it's ever been.
Mhm.
In my 20 odd years, I've never seen it this high. Um,
Now, the other thing, Saurabh, is also Trump and his administration were very close to Charlie Kirk. In fact, Trump's oldest son, Don Jr., considered him a brother like figure, and they spent a lot of time together, had deep family relations with each other. How determined is the Trump administration going to be about getting the person who did this and also ensuring that they get the death penalty? I was listening to the governor of Utah, and he said, I just want to remind everybody that in Utah, we still have the death penalty, which very clearly indicates that they will get this guy and then they will make sure that, figuratively speaking, he hangs for this crime.
yeah, I think that uh, it has really touched a conservative chord, and there isn't a single conservative who hasn't been hurt by this uh, in terms of the influences. Um, so from Trump to Vance, to people like Megyn Kelly, Mark Levin. So he's definitely not going to he's going to put the machinery behind uh, machinery to find the killer, um, and uh, and so that's another reason why I think whoever's done it will be found. I'd be very surprised if they can't with what they have and what they can do if they want to do. Um, and the main thing is that I honestly don't think that the assassin is going to fall nicely into some left wing caricature. Could there be a foreign hand? That's always a possibility. That's always a possibility. But then you have to ask, well,
And
why would it?
what would be the motivation, and maybe you don't want to name a country, but which part of the world would that foreign hand be working from? Because
Honestly,
I'm hearing all kinds of things, so I'm sort of curious to know what you think about this.
see, Charlie Kirk wasn't a decision maker in the decision making capacity. Like he wasn't like Secretary of State or something like that, or there wasn't
Sure.
some sort of arms deal that he was calling off.
But he had
So
Trump's, he used to be in the West Wing very often.
yeah,
He, yeah.
yeah, no, but he was fundamentally an influencer.
Hmm.
So on the surface, though there are many countries in the world that haven't quite feeling the reeling weight of the Trump administration, I'm not sure that if they were to do a logical calculation, they would gain anything from assassinating him.
No,
Um,
but if you wanted to cause civil unrest and, have people who are already have access to guns,
yeah,
and remember, I mean, this is something, that video is horrific.
the
It's
civil
horrific.
unrest, the civil unrest angle is, yeah, that I think I buy that. Um, it's sort of what India has faced over the last 50, 60 years. A lot of the violence in India has been uh, done with foreign hands with the view of causing civil unrest. Um, but there really hasn't been that many precedents, and in India it almost happens. But there really hasn't been any precedents of that degree of civil unrest here. And the only one I remember is the George Floyd. It wasn't really civil unrest; it was more rioting and
Right.
looting. It
But
wasn't like yeah,
the world has also changed, right? Because you can today get radicalized sitting on your couch at home,
right.
carry out the most unthinkable violence, which was possibly not an option 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but you have access to those triggers, to that influence, in a way that makes the world a far more dangerous place.
Yeah, I think that the cultivation of lone wolves, or the field that leads to lone wolves, is far more fertile now than it ever was before. Um, Maybe I'm lacking imagination over here. That's why I keep harping on about lone wolves. But I honestly think that it's perfectly. I mean, it's completely believable that some very highly skilled person, disgruntled for various reasons, he disgruntled. We don't know on what view of Charlie Kirk, or on some view, just decided to do what he did. I mean, look at the person that killed the CEO of the insurance company. This guy Luigi wasn't it wasn't like he came from a rich family. It wasn't like you'd imagine this sort of Bollywood story where Luigi's mother was dying because of cancer, and Mother India type of story, and he decides to take revenge against the CEO, who is Bran, sitting in his car. That's not what happened.
Yeah,
Well, this
yeah.
guy, this guy was came from a perfectly wealthy family. God knows what was going on inside his head. There wasn't any. He was very capable. He He went to a very good university, and he did what he did. And in the end, we can kind of scratch our heads why he did it. Why he, did he want to be a martyr? What did he want to do? What
But
was
then
the
again,
motive?
Saurabh, the reaction of the left, oh, he's so handsome. Oh, he's so amazing. And he got the big guy, he got the CEO. They didn't seem to care that this CEO was an average middle class guy who worked his way up, worked
Oh
hard to
yeah,
get where he got. And just the fact that you can't kill people for things like this. You just can't.
yeah. And the left will say to you, "I'm not justifying it. I'm just simply explaining why he did what he did." You won't win the argument against the left on that. So no, but my point here is that in the end, I think that a lot of the narrative that we build in terms of why people do what they do, what motivates them, and I honestly think that it turns out nothing like that really happens. Turns out in the end, you that just as many people kill because of their own sitting in the couch, their own self-radicalization. That you don't need the you never needed to be belong to an organization to pull something like this off, and you certainly don't today.
Well, difficult times, difficult times. I think this assassination really will have far more far-reaching consequences than maybe you and I can even imagine right now. It
Yeah.
definitely will see a shift in psyche, if
If
and hopefully that's where it'll stop and it won't lead to real violence on the streets.
Yeah, the shift in psyche is definitely I can see that happening, and I think
Hmm.
that's far more dangerous or far more. I mean, that's far more impactful than any civil war or riot because
Hmm.
that actually leads to people changing how they vote. It leads to change in the ballot box, which is much more impactful. And I think that's what you're going to see um, over the next. I mean, I think this is going to keep replaying. This is going to keep replaying on X and the adverts, and it'll make a difference in the midterm elections.
Oh, yes, because in politics, and people always underestimate this, but I always point it out, is that emotions are very important. You
Yeah,
can have all policies, you can have all the muddas, as we call them in India, but it is actually emotions. If you catch people on the emotional front,
yeah,
you will see the kind of voting pattern changes that you want to see. And this is a deeply emotional issue for a lot of people. Like I said, even people who aren't necessarily supporters of his, or even people sitting far away, just have been stunned by this
mhm,
particular incident.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really it. Hoping for peace and no civil unrest at a difficult time like this. Right, very last question. Trump, when he spoke yesterday, uh, didn't offer any kind of words of, coming together or anything like that. He was pretty upfront. He said, this is the radical left lunatic sort of aspect of it. America at this point of time doesn't really have a president who would sort of say the sort of right thing and say, come together at this time. Be and
Yeah, honestly speaking, I think if he said come together, I think that would have hurt the right even more. Like it would have irritated them even more. Secondly, the the coming together is okay when you have is the right thing to say when you have people that are on the verge of warring against each other. You don't have that situation here at the moment, right now.
Hmm.
Um,
That's the
but
thing,
coming,
right? Because it's so obvious to me sitting so far away, and scanning the different news channels, and watching even how which comments of viewers and I mean the witnesses, the channels are replaying and replaying. there is a lot simmering under the surface.
There is a lot of simmering under the surface, and you, I don't think that even if he said it's time for the nation to heal or come together, would I don't think it would have been appropriate yesterday.
At this stage, yeah.
Yeah, I think I honestly don't think that people should be blaming left wingers for this, because we really don't know. Just because they're celebrating, or some of them are celebrating, doesn't mean that. And quite a few of the Democrat politicians, a lot of them just came in support, from Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris. They came in support and said this is political violence has no place. I mean, that's really all you can say. Political violence has no place. Like, if you don't like what somebody's saying, debate them. But I think that yes, there's a lot of simmering, there's a lot of resentment. You do make a good point about the healing aspect, but I honestly think that I don't think that there is uh, any. I don't think it would have been appropriate to say that yesterday.
And also, I mean, last question. You're a doctor. There was a moment when it was thought that maybe he had been stabilized. He was critical, but he had been stabilized. Looking at that video, how did you feel? Did you feel like this person had a chance of making it, or did you feel it's pretty much too late?
I hoped that he would make it. I don't think that I was thinking in terms of as a physician, but looking back at it, the bullet rebounded and hit his neck, which probably meant that it got his carotid artery or his jugular vein. And if you get that with that velocity, and with the video is very gruesome, but there was blood spurting out. I think it would have been very unlikely for him to survive. But at the time, I was very much hoping that he would. That somehow, miraculously, we we see sometimes the bullet grazes past the skin. Maybe it was one of those occasions, but it wasn't, of course.
Well, here's wishing the United States peaceful times ahead. And of course, prayers for Charlie Kirk and his family going through a devastating loss. And I just really hope that this doesn't lead to more violence. And we'll keep an eye on it. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. And thank you, Dr. Saurabh Jha, for being with us as well. A lot going on in our part of the world. Nepal's going through a tumultuous time. And that's worthy of a discussion. I don't know if you're following that, Saurabh.
Yeah, there was a school kid that gave this really rising speech a few months ago that went viral. And it kind of shows what Nepal is facing, and why India is so different, and in many ways luckier, much luckier.
We should discuss this, actually. We should discuss this. I'd love to explore that with you, because being from Bihar, you're literally neighbors.
But the thing, I go to Nepal quite often.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, I actually go there quite often as a physician, mostly to help the Sherpa community in the foothills of the Himalayas. So I've done so. So I've spent a lot of time in Kathmandu. I know the place reasonably well. And the big problem with Nepal is that it hasn't been able to generate that middle class rise that India somehow has.
We must discuss this. I'm going to make you stop there, because before we dive into this, because I want to do a separate show on it. And I've lived in Nepal as well. I lived there for 5 years. So I'm familiar with the country as well. So we should do another show on this whenever you have the time, hopefully in the next couple of days, giving your schedule and things of that sort. But we must discuss this.
Yeah, we can talk about Nepal and Gen Z uprising.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe tomorrow, day after, whatever works for you.
Great. Take care. Thanks for having me, and thanks for addressing this this topic very sensitively.
No, I actually feel very, very sad. Never knew him, never met him, didn't agree with him on many things. But this is no way to go, and this is not what you can do to people just
Yeah.
because you disagree with them. That's just not right. So, well, thank you everybody for watching,
Thank you.
and we will be back soon enough. Hopefully, back with Saurabh on Nepal, because I really want to talk about that, and praying for peace there as well. I mean, enough. So let hope this madness ends. The astrologers here would say Mangal ki dasha shuru hui hai, lunar eclipse hua hai. So these things are going to happen. But hoping for peace and calm to prevail. It's been a rough year. Thank you everybody for watching. Do like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, and bye bye.
Thank you. Take care.